What if there are still creatures out there, hiding in the vast, wild parts of our world, undiscovered? It's a thought that's kind of thrilling, maybe a little unsettling.
It really is. And today, we're diving deep into one of the biggest legends tied to that idea, certainly in North America, Bigfoot, or Sasquatch, as it's also known.
Exactly. And this isn't just like a simple ghost story told around a campfire. We're talking about a giant, hairy, ape-like creature supposedly roaming the forests.
Right. And our mission here is to really dig into a whole range of sources we've gathered. We've got old newspaper clippings, indigenous stories passed down for generations, academic papers, even some pretty lively online debates.
Our goal is to pull out the key insights, look at where people disagree, and maybe figure out what this whole search for Bigfoot tells us about ourselves, about our curiosity, how we deal with the unknown.
Yeah, it's more than just asking, is it real?
Yeah.
It's about the whole phenomenon. So let's get started.
Okay, so where should we begin? Maybe with the history. Because Bigfoot, or Sasquatch, wasn't just invented recently.
Definitely not. Long before Europeans arrived in North America, many indigenous groups had stories about creatures very much like Bigfoot. They were already part of the landscape, culturally speaking.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. Take the Tula River tribe in California. They have traditions about the hairy man, Mayak data, or Sunsunan. And incredibly, there are picographs, rock paintings, believed to be about 1,000 years old, that seem to show these figures.
Wow, 1,000 years. What do these paintings look like?
Well, one source describes them as large, two-legged figures. There's even what looks like a hairy man family depicted parents, a child. You can make out features like long hair, kind of haunting eyes. The child figure even has a rounded head shape that some think suggests a sagittal crest.
A sagittal crest, like you see on gorillas.
Exactly, that bony ridge on the skull.
Eh.
And the stories around hairy man are fascinating. He wasn't just some monster. In their creation stories, he actually argued for humans to walk upright.
Really? That's unexpected.
Yeah, and he was known for, well, stealing acorn meal, a food staple, and leaving these huge footprints behind. But he was also seen as a protector. He apparently ate dangerous animals, keeping the area safer for people.
So, a bit of a complex figure then. Protector, but also a thief.
And also something to be feared. Parents would warn kids, don't go near the river at night. Hairy man might get you, eat you bones and all. So there's that duality.
He also had a spiritual side, didn't he?
Yes, very much so. Seen as a caretaker of the dead, sometimes appearing in dreams to offer healing. There was a belief he carried souls to a sacred mountain, Mount Kiliman. It shows how deeply woven into the culture this figure was.
And this belief isn't just ancient history for them.
Apparently not entirely. The source mentioned an eyewitness account from the reservation back in 2004. Someone saw a large, hairy creature, reddish-brown hair, ape-like face, and the witness immediately connected it to their traditions about Bigfoot and its connection to the dead.
That's incredible. It really grounds the legend in a much older, richer context than just, modern sightings.
It absolutely does. It shows these ideas were present long before the term Bigfoot even existed in Western culture.
Okay, so let's transition then. How did this idea of a wild man start appearing in, say, early American accounts?
Well, you start seeing newspaper reports about wild man sightings pop up, particularly in the late 1800s. The concept itself kind of shifted over time.
Oh, so?
Early on, it was influenced by things like Linnaeus's classification Homo ferens, described as hairy, mute, maybe walking on all fours. But then, as explorers brought back accounts of gorillas from Africa, the image started morphing into something more like a half-man, half-ape creature.
And newspapers picked up on this.
Oh, yeah. One of our sources looked at old Oregon newspapers. It's actually kind of funny. Some journalists seemed almost bored by the constant reports, even writing satirical pieces.
Bigfoot fatigue in the 1900s.
Exactly. But mixed in with the jokes were these really vivid accounts from hunters, loggers, people describing huge, hairy figures walking upright, letting out these unsettling screams or yells.
So even back then, the descriptions were pretty consistent with what people report now.
Often, yes. There's a specific example from 1882, a cowboy in Polk County, Oregon. He described seeing a wild man over 6 feet tall, muscular arms reaching down near the knees, thick black hair all over, broad chest like a bear's, bright eyes, even large canine teeth.
Wow, and stealing livestock, too.
That's part of the report, yeah.
Yeah.
Stealing livestock. It's striking how closely that description matches many modern Bigfoot reports. Suggests a persistent image, at least.
Okay, we can't really talk about Bigfoot evidence without getting to the big one, the Patterson-Gimlin film.
Right, 1967, Probably the single most famous and most debated piece of purported evidence. It really cemented Bigfoot in the public imagination.
So set the scene for us. Who are Patterson and Gimlin?
Roger Patterson was, well, pretty obsessed with Bigfoot. He wanted to make a documentary, write a book. Bob Gimlin was his friend. They went on an expedition on horseback into the Bluff Creek area of Northern California in October '67.
And that's when they saw something.
According to them, yes. Patterson's horse suddenly reared. He looked up and saw this large, hairy, upright figure walking across a sandbar near the creek. He scrambled to get his 16mm movie camera, which he'd rented, and started filming.
The resulting footage?
Yeah.
So just under a minute long, right? Grainy, shaky in parts?
59.5 seconds, yeah. It shows this figure, which they nicknamed Patty, walking away, seemingly female due to visible breasts, and famously glancing back towards the camera around frame 352.
Patterson described it himself, didn't he? Getting the horse under control, grabbing the camera, yelling at Gimlin to cover him.
Yeah, he estimated he got maybe 60 to 90 feet away while filming. It's dramatic stuff.
But almost immediately, people started saying it was a fake.
Oh, instantly. The skepticism came fast. A big point was Patterson's potential financial motive. He did make money touring with the film, showing it, selling his book. That raised red flags for many.
And weren't there specific claims about a costume?
Yes. A costume maker named Philip Morris claimed years later that he sold Patterson an ape suit. And then there was Bob Hieronymus, a guy from Yakima, Washington, who claimed he was the one inside the suit, paid by Patterson.
Those are pretty direct allegations. Were there other doubts?
Some questioned the timeline, like how quickly they got the film developed and started promoting it. Could it have been planned, maybe even filmed earlier? Those kinds of questions lingered.
Okay, so that's the case for it being a hoax. What about the arguments for its authenticity?
Well, proponents point to several things. Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, an anatomy and anthropology professor, is a key voice here. He argues the way the muscles appear to move under the skin in the film, the limb proportions. It would be incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, to fake with 1967 costume technology.
And the footprints found at the site?
That's crucial for Meldrum and others. The casts made from footprints allegedly left by the creature show features like a flexible midfoot, a mid-tarsal break, which is characteristic of apes, not humans. And crucially, that specific aspect of ape-foot mechanics wasn't widely known in '67. So how could a hoaxer incorporate that detail?
That's a good point. What about Bob Gimlin?
He stuck to his story consistently for over 50 years now. Never changed his account of what he saw that day. That consistency lends weight for believers.
And the film itself has been analyzed, right? Technically.
Yeah, people like Bill Munns, who has a background in film and special effects, and Meldrum again have done detailed analyses. They argue there's no sign of tampering, like editing or splicing on the original film before copies were made. Munns even argued the film is actually in perfect focus, and the blurriness people associate with it comes from poor TV transfers over the years.
Interesting. And didn't some Hollywood folks weigh in?
That's another point proponents raise. Apparently, executives or effects people from Universal and even Disney saw the film early on and supposedly said duplicating it with the technology available back then would be almost impossible. They mentioned needing some kind of new system of artificial muscles.
So the debate rages on. It's this iconic piece of footage that satisfies neither side completely.
Exactly. It remains the centerpiece, the thing everyone has to grapple with, whether they believe or dismiss it.
Okay, so moving beyond the Patterson-Gimlin film, let's look at the broader range of evidence proponents put forward. What else do they point to?
Well, footprints are a huge category. We mentioned Dr. Meldrum's collection, over 300 casts. He sees them as a significant body of data pointing towards an unknown primate. They often show anatomical details like that mid-tarsal break or dermal ridges in some cases that proponents argue rule out simple carving or natural formations.
Right, the footprint casts. What about physical samples, hair, DNA?
That's another area. There are numerous claims of finding hair samples attributed to Bigfoot. Sometimes analyses suggest they don't match known animals. A characteristic often mentioned is the hair lacking a medulla, the central core. There have also been claims of finding DNA, blood, though often these results are ambiguous or contested.
Okay, and then there are these reports of structures in the woods.
Yes, tree structures. Things like large branches lean together to form teepee-like shapes, sometimes 12, 15 feet tall, or saplings twisted or bent in ways that seem unnatural, not caused by weather or animals. Some researchers interpret these as possible territorial markers or shelters made by the hominoid.
It paints a picture of something trying to interact with its environment, maybe leave signs.
Which leads into theories about their behavior. How could such a large creature stay hidden? Proponents suggest extreme intelligence and self.
Like being nocturnal, shy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Highly intelligent, primarily nocturnal, very wary of humans. There are theories they deliberately walk on the edges of trails or on hard ground to avoid leaving clear tracks. Some even suggest they use utility corridors like power line cuts or old railroad beds as kind of hidden travel routes, highways through the wilderness.
That's quite a theory. Bigfoot highways?
Yeah.
What about their senses or abilities?
Yeah, reports often mention incredible sensory awareness and ability to detect humans from far off and just melt into the forest. There are also accounts of mimicry, mimicking animal sounds, maybe as communication or camouflage.
And their place in the ecosystem? Are they seen as predators?
Some theories definitely place them high up the food chain, like an apex predator. There are anecdotal reports suggesting they prey on deer, elk, even claims of them scaring off or killing bears or alligators in some regions. One report detailed finding a 5-foot deep pit, supposedly dug by a Sasquatch to get at hibernating ground squirrels, apparently by sniffing rocks to locate them underground.
Wow. Resourceful. So, hunting, but also foraging.
Oh yeah, berries, nuts, roots, fish, basically omnivorous opportunists. There are stories of them raiding fishing nets for salmon or taking deer carcasses left by hunters. Very adaptable, according to these theories.
Which brings up the big question, survival. Especially in winter, in colder climates. How would they manage?
Proponents have several ideas. One is hibernation or maybe a state of torpor, like bears, to conserve energy during the winter months when food is scarce.
Okay, what else?
Food caching, storing meat, perhaps burying it in snowbanks or underground burrows, similar to how wolverines survive. And there's also the idea of steatopigia.
Sorry, what was that?
Steatopigia. It means having significant fat deposits, especially on the buttocks. Some observations have noted this feature on purported Bigfoot figures, suggesting it could be an adaptation, like camels' humps, storing energy for lean times. A Russian account even mentioned this fat being used for cooking by the creature.
Okay, so lots of theories trying to explain how they could exist and persist without leaving more obvious evidence.
Exactly. These theories attempt to build a plausible biological and behavioral profile for an elusive large primate.
Right, so now we need to turn to the other side, the skeptics. What are their main counter-arguments?
Well, the absolute biggest one, the one that underlies almost all scientific skepticism, is the lack of definitive, tangible proof. Specifically, a body. Or clear, verifiable biological samples DNA that undoubtedly belongs to a new primate species. Or crystal clear photos or videos that can't be explained away.
It comes down to the physical evidence or lack thereof.
Pretty much. Skeptics argue that for a breeding population of large animals to exist for centuries, maybe millennia, across North America, they would leave undeniable traces. Bones, teeth, feces, hair that's conclusively non-human, nests or shelters, something concrete. And the argument is we just haven't found that smoking gun.
So what about all the sightings then, the footprints?
Misidentification is the leading explanation offered by skeptics, especially bears. Bears can stand and walk upright for short periods. They're large, hairy, live in the same habitats. A 2009 study even modeled the supposed Sasquatch environmental niche and found it overlapped 100% with the American black bear's niche.
A perfect overlap. That's suggestive.
It definitely gives weight to the misidentification theory. Bears are also notoriously hard to identify correctly sometimes, especially in low light or from a distance.
And eyewitness accounts. Proponents rely on them heavily, but skeptics are wary.
Very wary. The scientific consensus is that eyewitness testimony, even from sincere, credible people, is notoriously unreliable. Our perceptions can be influenced by fear, expectation, poor visibility, stress, and cultural narratives play a huge role. Skeptics suggest the consistency in descriptions might reflect shared folklore or cognitive patterns, rather than sightings of an actual creature.
What about the sheer number of reports across almost the entire continent?
Ironically, skeptics see that widespread reporting as less plausible. If Bigfoot existed in nearly every state except Hawaii, surely, they argue, one would have been hit by a car, caught in a trap, definitively filmed, or left clear remains somewhere by now. Such a wide distribution makes the lack of hard evidence even more puzzling from their perspective.
So the ubiquity works against it, in their view, and they still point to the possibility of hoaxes, like with the Patterson-Gimlin film.
Absolutely. While proponents analyze the film's gait and muscles, skeptics keep highlighting the claims of people like Philip Morris and Bob Hieronymus who said it was a hoax. The burden of proof for scientists rests on those making the claim, so proponents need to definitively disprove the hoax allegations, not just argue it was difficult to fake.
There's also the issue of mainstream science largely ignoring the topic, right?
Yeah, historically, there's been a fear of ridicule. Serious academics often avoided the subject, worried it would damage their reputation. Proponents argue this means conclusions are often drawn from afar, from classrooms, rather than through dedicated fieldwork by skeptical scientists.
And finally, there's been some research into the demographics, the people who tend to believe or search for Bigfoot.
Yeah, some studies suggest Bigfoot enthusiasts often tend to fall into certain demographics: white, male, working, or middle class, sometimes more conservative politically. Other research has explored potential links between belief in Bigfoot, other paranormal phenomena, and sometimes a tendency towards conspiracy thinking.
That doesn't disprove anything, of course, but it adds a sociological or psychological layer to how the phenomenon is viewed by some in the scientific community.
Exactly. It becomes part of the broader context when trying to understand the whole Bigfoot picture.
Okay, so we've covered the history, the famous film, the evidence for and against, which brings us to the big so what? Why does this all matter? What does the ongoing search and debate tell us?
I think it tells us a lot about science itself. It highlights that tension, doesn't it, between needing hard empirical evidence versus compelling anecdotal accounts or long-standing traditional knowledge. How do we weigh those different things, especially when something remains stubbornly in the unknown category?
That's a great point. And even if, hypothetically, Bigfoot isn't a biological reality, the idea of Bigfoot, the search for it, still has real effects, right?
Absolutely. You mentioned the objects, the footprints, the hair samples, the stories. Even if they originate from misidentification or hoaxes, they still act on people. They drive research, they shape theories, they build communities. The pursuit itself becomes a real phenomenon, regardless of the objective reality of the creature.
And that community has become quite sophisticated in some ways, hasn't it?
It really has. You see a move towards more, quote-unquote, professionalized methods. Groups like the BFRO, the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, hold conferences, publish findings, use academic-style language, often featuring speakers with academic credentials in related fields. It's becoming more like, well, citizen science.
Yeah, that's an interesting parallel. I remember reading about the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, putting out a zombie apocalypse preparedness guide.
Right, they weren't saying zombies are real, but they cleverly used the public's fascination with zombies to teach actual disaster preparedness skills.
So maybe there's a similar potential with Bigfoot. Engaging people in the search, even if you're skeptical about the creature itself, could be a way to teach field research methods, critical thinking, data collection, basically science skills.
It's a fascinating thought. Could the search for Bigfoot be a backdoor into science education? Maybe. It certainly engages people passionately, and it raises important questions about how science communicates and how the public perceives scientific authority and knowledge.
Yeah, how scientists approach these fringe topics, how they talk about the unknown, definitely impacts public trust, doesn't it?
It does. Being dismissive can alienate people, while engaging thoughtfully, even with skepticism, might foster more trust and understanding of the scientific process itself.
So wrapping this all up, it seems clear the Bigfoot legend is way more than just a simple yes or no question.
Definitely. It's this incredibly rich tapestry woven from folklore, eyewitness accounts, scientific debate, human psychology, and our enduring fascination with the wild and the unknown.
It really serves as a lens, doesn't it? A way to look at how we explore, how we gather evidence, how science evolves, and just the raw power of a good story.
Exactly. It pushes us to think about the boundaries of our knowledge and how we react when something seems to exist just beyond them.
So after this deep dive, what does it all mean for you listening in? Maybe the point isn't finding a definitive answer about Bigfoot's existence. Maybe it's about what this whole enduring quest reveals about us, about science, about the many ways we try to make sense of the world. The real question might be, what mystery will you choose to explore next?